The maternity ward was usually a place where emotions ran high but softened by the presence of new life. That morning, however, tension hung in the air like a storm cloud that refused to move on. Nurses walked quietly along the corridor, their shoes squeaking softly against the polished floor, while behind one of the doors a confrontation was unfolding that would soon leave everyone stunned. The young woman lay in her hospital bed, pale from exhaustion yet glowing with the fragile happiness that follows childbirth. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the thin blanket, listening to the sharp clicking of heels approaching. She already knew who it was before the door swung open. Her mother-in-law entered without knocking, her posture rigid, her lips pressed into a thin line that suggested she had rehearsed this moment carefully. "I told you I didn't want you here," the older woman snapped, her voice cutting through the quiet room. "You've embarrassed this family enough. Once you're discharged, you'll go straight back to where you came from." The daughter-in-law tried to sit up, pain flashing across her face. She had imagined many versions of motherhood, but none included being threatened and humiliated hours after giving birth. "This is my child too," she said softly, though her voice shook. "You can't just throw me out." The mother-in-law scoffed, folding her arms. "Don't play innocent. My son deserves better. You trapped him, and now you think a baby will secure your place. You're mistaken." The words hit harder than any physical blow. Tears welled in the young woman's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Around them, the machines hummed steadily, indifferent to human cruelty. For a moment, it seemed as though the older woman had won, her dominance unquestioned. Then footsteps echoed again in the hallway, heavier and more deliberate this time. The door opened, and a man stepped inside. His presence immediately shifted the balance in the room. He wasn't loud, didn't raise his voice, but the authority he carried was undeniable. The mother-in-law froze mid-sentence, her mouth slightly open, as if the words had simply abandoned her. "You won't say another word," he said calmly. "Not here. Not ever again." The mother-in-law stared at him, shock draining the color from her face. This was not the outcome she had expected. The man continued, his gaze steady. "You're heading to the wrong station if you think intimidation will control this family. From this moment on, your interference ends." Silence followed, thick and absolute. The older woman's confidence collapsed, replaced by a stunned stillness. She turned without another word and left the room, her heels no longer clicking with authority but retreat. Relief washed over the young mother as tears finally spilled down her cheeks. The man moved closer, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You're safe," he said gently. "You always were." Elsewhere, in a brightly lit television studio thousands of miles away, another confrontation was unfolding, one that would soon make headlines. Reba McEntire sat across from Kelly Clarkson, the atmosphere charged in a way that viewers could sense even through their screens. What was meant to be a light-hearted conversation about music and shared experiences had taken a sharp turn. Kelly smiled politely, but her questions became more pointed, edging into territory that Reba had clearly hoped to avoid. The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats as Reba's expression hardened. Years in the industry had taught her how to handle difficult moments, but this felt different. It felt personal. "I think we should move on," Reba said, her tone firm but controlled. Kelly attempted to laugh it off, pressing forward with another comment that struck too close to home. That was when Reba's patience ran out. She set down her microphone, her chair scraping softly against the floor as she stood. "No," she said. "I'm not doing this." Gasps rippled through the studio. Cameras scrambled to adjust as Reba walked off the stage, leaving a stunned silence behind her. Kelly sat frozen for a moment, then tried to address the audience, her voice strained as she attempted to smooth over what had just happened. Within minutes, social media erupted. Clips of the walk-off spread rapidly, opinions flying from every direction. Some applauded Reba for standing her ground, praising her refusal to tolerate disrespect. Others criticized the moment as unprofessional, dissecting every word and gesture as if they were evidence in a trial. Yet beneath the spectacle lay a deeper truth that resonated with many. Whether in a hospital room or on a television set, the need to draw boundaries, to say, enough, was universal. The young mother in the maternity ward had learned that day that silence did not equal weakness, and that support could arrive when least expected. Reba McEntire's walk-off echoed the same sentiment on a public stage, reminding viewers that even icons have limits. As the day wore on, the hospital returned to its usual rhythm. Nurses checked vitals, visitors whispered congratulations, and a new mother held her child a little closer, fortified by the knowledge that she was not alone. In the studio, producers regrouped, and the show went on, altered but unbroken. Both moments, though vastly different in scale and setting, carried the same lesson. Respect is not something to be demanded through fear or manipulation, it is something that must be given freely or defended firmly. And sometimes, the most powerful response is not shouting or arguing, but standing up and walking away. The corridor outside the maternity ward smelled faintly of antiseptic and fresh linen, a combination that usually signaled safety and care. That morning, however, the air felt heavy, as if the walls themselves were listening. Inside one of the rooms, a young woman lay awake despite her exhaustion, her body aching and her heart racing. She had given birth only hours earlier, and while joy flickered inside her when she looked at her newborn, fear and uncertainty pressed just as hard. She heard the door open without a knock. The sound was sharp, intrusive, and instantly set her nerves on edge. Her mother-in-law stepped inside with a rigid posture and an expression carved from disapproval. She didn't glance at the baby, didn't soften at the sight of new life. Instead, her eyes fixed on the woman in the bed, cold and calculating. "I warned you," she began, her voice low but venomous. "This ends today. You don't belong in this family, and you never did. As soon as you're released, you're leaving." The young mother swallowed, her throat dry. She tried to shift upright, wincing as pain shot through her body. "This is a hospital," she said quietly. "You can't talk to me like this. I've just given birth." "That changes nothing," the older woman replied. "A baby doesn't make you family. You're an inconvenience, and my son will see that once I make things clear." Tears threatened to spill, but the young woman forced herself to breathe. She glanced at the sleeping infant beside her, drawing strength from the tiny rise and fall of the baby's chest. "I'm not going anywhere," she said, her voice trembling but determined. "This is my child. You don't get to decide our future." The mother-in-law laughed sharply, a sound devoid of warmth. "You're naive if you think you have a choice." At that moment, footsteps approached the room. They were steady, unhurried, and confident. The door opened again, and a man entered, his presence commanding immediate attention. He took in the scene in seconds, the pale woman in the bed, the tension, the accusatory stance of his mother, and his jaw tightened. "That's enough," he said. The mother-in-law turned, surprise flashing across her face. "This doesn't concern you," she snapped, though her voice lacked its earlier strength. "It concerns me completely," he replied. "You will not threaten my wife. Not here. Not ever." The word, wife, hung in the air like a shield. The older woman opened her mouth to argue, but no sound came out. Her confidence crumbled under the weight of his gaze. "You're heading to the wrong station if you think control and cruelty will get you what you want," he continued calmly. "From now on, you respect boundaries, or you remove yourself from our lives." Silence followed, thick and undeniable. The mother-in-law's face went pale. Without another word, she turned and left the room, her footsteps retreating down the corridor. The young mother exhaled shakily, tears finally spilling as the tension drained from her body. The man moved closer, gently taking her hand. "I should have stopped this sooner," he said softly. "But it ends today." Later that same day, in a bustling television studio far removed from the quiet intensity of the hospital, another moment of confrontation was brewing. Bright lights shone down on a polished stage where Kelly Clarkson sat opposite Reba McEntire. The audience expected warmth, laughter, and shared stories between two beloved figures in music. For a while, that's exactly what they got. But the conversation slowly shifted. Questions grew sharper, less playful. Reba's smile faded just slightly as Kelly pressed into sensitive territory, probing topics Reba had clearly guarded for years. The atmosphere changed, subtle but unmistakable. Reba adjusted in her chair, her hands clasping together. "I think we should steer this back," she said evenly. Kelly smiled, attempting to keep things light, but continued. The tension was now visible, a current running beneath every word. Reba took a breath, years of experience guiding her response, but also years of self-respect. She stood up. The movement alone sent a ripple through the audience. Reba placed her microphone down carefully, her expression composed but resolute. "I'm done," she said. "I won't sit here and be pushed. Gasps echoed through the studio as Reba walked off the stage. Cameras hesitated, producers whispered urgently, and Kelly remained seated, momentarily stunned. When she finally spoke, it was clear she was scrambling to regain control, to explain what viewers had just witnessed. Within minutes, the moment exploded online. Clips spread rapidly, dissected frame by frame. Some praised Reba for asserting her boundaries, calling the walk-off powerful and necessary. Others criticized her decision, accusing her of overreacting. The debate raged, fueled by speculation and strong opinions. Yet for many watching, something deeper resonated. The walk-off wasn't just about a tense interview, it was about knowing when to say no, when to stand up and refuse to be diminished. In a world that often rewards endurance over dignity, Reba's decision struck a chord. Back in the hospital, evenings settled in softly. The ward grew quieter, lights dimmed, and the young mother cradled her baby against her chest. The events of the day replayed in her mind, the fear, the confrontation, the sudden shift when support appeared. She realized how close she had come to believing she was powerless. She wasn't. On the television mounted high on the wall, muted news footage played. Reba McEntire's walk-off was already being discussed, commentators arguing about professionalism and pride. The young woman watched, briefly, then looked down at her child and smiled faintly. Different worlds, different battles, but the same truth echoed through both. Boundaries matter. Silence in the face of mistreatment only invites more of it. Sometimes strength arrives quietly, in the form of someone stepping into a room and saying, "Enough." Other times, it looks like standing up under bright lights and walking away. As night deepened, the hospital settled into its steady rhythm once more. A new family rested, fragile but united. Somewhere else, a television show moved on, forever marked by a moment of unexpected resolve. And in both places, the message lingered: respect is not optional, and dignity is worth defending, no matter the cost.